Kieran Vance didn't expect his Tuesday night to end with a stranger's car halfway in a snowy ditch, and her face pressed against the driver's window, fogging up the glass with panicked breaths. "Daddy, she's not moving," cried Callie from the backseat, clutching her stuffed bunny as snowflakes danced in the beam of their headlights. Kieran threw the truck into park, yanked on his gloves, and was out the door before Callie could say another word. The snowstorm had hit faster than the forecast warned, and the roads leading into their tiny Montana town were slick with ice and powdered over with fresh snow. Whoever this was, they'd either taken a wrong turn or had zero business driving a low-clearance luxury car through these parts. He trudged through the snow, boots crunching, and knocked hard on the frosted window. The woman inside startled, eyes wide, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was keeping her alive. She shoved open the door and nearly fell into his arms. I couldn't get the brakes to catch," she stammered, shivering violently. "I turned and the car just slid. I didn't see that. It's okay." "You're okay," Kieran said, steadying her by the shoulders. She was soaked, her coat entirely useless against the cold, her shoes more runway than winter. "My phone's dead," she added. "I've been stuck for almost an hour." I thought, her voice cracked. "Truck's warm. Come on." He guided her toward the pickup, arm around her back. She was shaking so hard he could feel it through his jacket. "Callie," he said as he opened the passenger door, "scoot over, sweetheart." The little girl's eyes were huge, but she obeyed, moving to the middle of the bench seat. The woman climbed in, teeth chattering, and Kieran shut the door behind her. The heater blasted warm air, and the wrapped blanket Callie passed forward was clutched like a lifeline. "I'm Kieran." "This is my daughter, Callie." The woman hesitated. Lena Vaughn," he nodded, glanced at her again. Something about her posture was off, too stiff, too polished. She stuck out in his truck like a diamond in a toolbox. "Where were you headed?" "I was trying to get to a lodge just outside of town. An assistant booked it for me. I think I took a wrong route." "You sure did." He gave her a sideways look. "That road doesn't get plowed until morning." "Perfect," she exhaled, deflating. "Just perfect." Kieran didn't ask why she was dressed like she'd walked off a fashion magazine shoot. He didn't ask why she drove a white imported luxury sedan with California plates through a blizzard. He just drove. His place wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen that still had a broken cabinet door, but it was warm, dry, and safe. Lena didn't argue when he led her inside. "I don't have a guest room," he said, tossing her a towel. "But Callie's got a sleeping bag if you want the couch." "I don't want to put you out. You're not. You're cold, tired, and lucky you didn't break your neck. Take the couch." Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Kieran. You didn't have to stop." Not stopping wasn't an option. "Not with my kid in the car watching." She looked at Callie, who was now in pajamas, brushing her teeth and humming to herself in the hallway. "She's sweet. She's everything." Lena's eyes flicked to him then, studying his face like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. Kieran looked away first. Later that night, Kieran sat at the small kitchen table, working on some overdue invoices for his handyman jobs. Lena was curled on the couch, wrapped in Callie's dinosaur blanket, her long brown hair still damp from the shower. "Your truck," she said suddenly. "It's old, but it runs like new." He glanced up. "I rebuilt the engine myself. Took 3 months. You fix things for a living." "Yeah, I do repairs around town, plumbing, roofing, electrical, whatever's needed." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. "You're a single dad." "Yep, and she's 5, 6 next month." Lena didn't ask about Callie's mother, and he didn't offer. Instead, she said softly, "You're doing a good job." He paused. "Thanks," she shifted. "I'll get out of your hair first thing in the morning. As soon as I can call a tow." Kieran didn't answer that. He just looked at her. This woman with city hands and lost eyes, sitting on his couch like she didn't belong there but somehow, weirdly, fit. When Callie came out in the middle of the night, sleepy-eyed and whispering, "Daddy, can she stay for pancakes tomorrow?" Lena smiled. Kieran just looked down at his daughter, tucked her into his lap, and said, "We'll see, bug." But something in Lena's face changed then, like no one had invited her to pancakes in a long, long time. The next morning, the sun came out bright and blinding, the snow glittering like diamonds on the trees. Kieran made pancakes. Callie added too many chocolate chips. Lena laughed like she hadn't in years. And when a tow truck finally arrived, Kieran walked Lena down the drive, her boots crunching beside his. "I owe you," she said, brushing snow off her coat. "Big time." "You don't," he said, "but if you want to pay me back." She raised a brow. "There's a diner in town. Best pie in 3 counties. You could buy me a slice." Lena stared at him. "Are you asking me out?" "I'm asking you to pay me in pie." Her smile was slow, surprised. "Okay, pie it is." As she drove off, this time in the passenger seat of a tow truck, Callie tugged on Kieran's hand. "Will she come back?" He looked down at his daughter, then back at the road Lena had disappeared down. "I think she might," he said, and he hoped like hell she would. Lena returned 3 days later, not in a tow truck, but in a black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who looked like he belonged outside a Manhattan hotel, not on a slushy backroad in Montana. Kieran spotted her through the diner's front window just as he was wiping down the last of the tables. She stepped out of the SUV, her coat long, boots practical this time, and her expression uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether she'd be welcome. She walked in without making a sound, the bell above the door giving her away before her heels could. "You're late," he said without looking up. "I brought pie," she replied, lifting a white box with a gold ribbon. He set his rag down. "That's cheating. You were supposed to buy me a slice, not bribe me with a whole bakery." She tilted her head. "I figured I owed you interest." He nodded at the booth in the corner. "Sit. I'll grab us coffee." As Kieran poured 2 mugs behind the counter, Lena moved to the booth, her fingers brushing the worn tabletop as if trying to memorize its grain. She looked out of place again, but not in the same way she had the night he'd found her. This time she didn't seem lost, just unsure of how to start. When he slid into the seat across from her, she wrapped her hands around the coffee cup and exhaled. "I looked you up," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You looked me up." "I didn't Google you," she clarified. "I asked around. The woman at the post office said you rebuilt half of her kitchen. Someone else said you fixed a barn roof in the middle of a thunderstorm." He leaned back. "You don't strike me as someone who spends her days collecting small-town gossip." "I don't. But I wanted to know the kind of man who pulls a stranger from a ditch without asking for anything in return." Kieran didn't reply. Instead, he reached over and opened the pie box. Blueberry. Homemade. Rich, dark berries beneath a lattice crust. "I had it flown in from a bakery in Oregon," she said, watching his reaction. He paused. "That seems excessive." "I do everything excessively." "Is that something you're proud of?" She looked down at her coffee. "No." They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the dull hum of the refrigerator behind the counter and the wind tapping at the windows. Kieran finally asked, "You're not just here for pie, are you?" "No," she said, eyes still on her cup. "I'm staying at the lodge for another week. I needed to get away from Los Angeles, from expectations." He didn't press. Instead, he passed her a fork. "Then let's eat your over-the-top pie." They shared it in silence for a few minutes until Lena glanced at the photograph on the wall beside them. It was old, a black and white image of the town square during its first winter festival. "Do you ever think of leaving?" she asked. He studied her for a beat before answering. "I did, once." "What stopped you?" He hesitated. "I thought leaving would fix things. But it turns out running just makes the whole follow you." Lena's expression shifted. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It does." She didn't elaborate, and he didn't ask, but something passed between them in that moment, an understanding neither of them expected. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "To what?" Sitting across from someone and not feeling like they want something from me. He watched her carefully. "You think I want something? I don't know yet. But you haven't asked. Maybe I'm still deciding." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. When they finished the last bite, she stood and straightened her coat. "There's a winter fundraiser in town tomorrow night," she said. "They're doing a silent auction and a dance. Someone mentioned it earlier at the lodge. And you want to go? I want to invite you, and Callie." "I think she'd like it." He studied her, unsure what to say. "I can pick you both up," she added, sensing his hesitation, "or meet you there. Either way, it's not a date unless you want it to be." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You really don't do anything halfway?" "No," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I don't." She walked out without needing an answer. The SUV pulled away, tires crunching over gravel, and Kieran stared after it long after she disappeared. The next afternoon, Kieran stood in front of Callie's closet with a laundry basket under one arm and a knot in his stomach. He hated putting her in situations where she might feel out of place. The fundraiser would be full of town locals, but Lena's presence would change everything. "What do you think, Bug?" he asked as Callie held up two sweaters. She pointed to the one with glittery stars. "This one looks like party," he nodded. "Then party it is." Later that night, as they walked into the town hall, Kieran spotted Lena across the room. She wore a navy coat with white fur at the collar, simple but elegant. Her hair was pulled back, makeup soft. She wasn't trying to dazzle, she already had. And yet, the way she bent down to talk to one of the kids near the crafts table made her seem like she belonged. Callie ran ahead, drawn to the music and the smell of hot cocoa. Kieran approached slowly, unsure what to expect. "You came," she said, standing. "You invited us. I wasn't sure you'd say yes." "I wasn't either," he admitted. They watched Callie disappear into a group of kids decorating cookies. Lena turned to him. "I should tell you something." He looked down at her, voice low. "Now," she nodded. "You should know who I am, all of it." He didn't flinch. "Then tell me." Her expression was unreadable. "Not here." But soon. Before he could respond, the mayor stepped up to the microphone and announced the start of the dancing. A slow song drifted from the speakers. Couples began moving toward the floor. Lena held out her hand. "Just one dance." He stared at it for a long second, then took it, pulling her gently toward the center of the hall. She rested her hand on his shoulder, the other clasped in his. Close, but not too close. "Why me?" he asked softly. "Because you didn't flinch when I told you I wasn't ready to explain everything." Kieran didn't respond, but he didn't let go either. The music played on, and whatever this was, whatever it could become, had officially begun. Kieran didn't expect to see Lena again so soon after the fundraiser, but 2 days later, she walked into the hardware store while he was loading a new water heater onto a dolly. Her coat was dusted with melting snow, her boots finally scuffed from actual use, and her eyes locked on him like she was walking in with a purpose. "I need your help," she said without preamble. He straightened, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "With what?" "The lodge. The heat in the West Wing broke last night. Management's calling it a minor issue, but the pipes are groaning and the radiators are cold. They offered to move me to a different suite, but I kind of like the view from mine." She hesitated. "And I remembered what you said about fixing things." Kieran narrowed his eyes slightly. "You want me to repair a luxury lodge's heating system? I want someone I trust to look at it." "I'll pay you directly. You could have called." "I didn't want to give you the chance to say no," he sighed, picking up the dolly. "Let me drop this off first." It took another 15 minutes before he was pulling up in front of the lodge, Callie in the back seat coloring in a workbook she insisted on bringing everywhere. Lena was already waiting at the entrance, holding the door open as he parked. "I don't want to leave her in the car," he said quietly as they walked in. "She can come inside. There's a kid's corner in the library. I already checked, they've got puzzles and a beanbag chair." He tilted his head. "You planned that? I thought you might bring her." Once Callie was settled with a stack of books and a mug of cocoa someone at the front desk had offered without hesitation, Kieran followed Lena through the halls. The lodge was enormous vaulted ceilings, wide staircases, polished wood floors. He caught glimpses of fir throws, crystal vases, and a fireplace taller than he was. It wasn't just expensive. It was meticulously curated. The suite she led him to was bigger than his entire house. He tried not to let it show. "The radiator's been making this clicking sound," she said, walking ahead and pointing to a copper fixture under the bay window. "And the heat's not circulating." "I know I could have asked the staff, but I don't want someone who's going to slap a wrench on it and shrug." Kieran crouched down beside the radiator, removing his gloves. "You ever stay in places like this before?" "Too many," she said, leaning against the wall. "It's the quiet that attracted me this time. Usually I'm surrounded by people who act like silence is contagious." He glanced up from the radiator. "That's supposed to be deep." "No," she said. "Just honest." He worked in silence for a few minutes, listening to the pipes while feeling along the base. "There's air trapped in the line. That's why the radiator's cold. Whoever installed it didn't bleed the system properly. I can fix it, but the building's valves aren't standard." I'll need a key to the service panel. I can get it. When she returned with the access key and a maintenance map, he got to work. Lena watched him quietly, not with idle curiosity, but as though trying to memorize the way he moved, the way his jaw set when he concentrated, the way he muttered under his breath when the wrench slipped. "You're doing all this without asking me what I do," she said eventually. "Figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "I'm not used to that." He didn't respond. He just kept working, tightening the last valve before glancing up. "There, shouldn't give you any more trouble." Lena stepped forward, brushing her fingers against the radiator. "It's warm." He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth she'd brought him. "Give it 20 minutes. If it doesn't circulate to the far end, I'll come back and flush the line." She looked at him for a moment before saying, "I want to show you something." He hesitated. "What is it?" "My real life." He followed her down the hall, through a private elevator and into a floor he hadn't noticed before. The walls were lined with abstract art, and the doors were paneled in dark walnut. She unlocked the last one on the right. Inside was a study, not a hotel suite, not a guest room, but something altogether different. A glass desk overlooked the tree-dappled horizon. On the wall, a framed magazine cover featured her face under the headline, "Lena Vaughn, the Architect of Influence." "I own the Vaughn Group," she said quietly. "It's a private investment firm. We manage assets across fashion, real estate, and media. I've spent the last 10 years building it." Kieran's voice was low. "Why tell me now? Because I didn't want to be a lie in your life." He looked around. "So what was the plan?" "Hide out here until the storm passed, then vanish again." "I didn't plan any of this." She stepped forward, voice steadying. "You pulled me out of a ditch and didn't care what I was wearing or who I was. You let me into your home. You let your daughter share her blanket with me. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Kieran crossed his arms. "You could have told me that night. I didn't know how, and by the time I did, I didn't want to change the way you looked at me." He exhaled, turning toward the window. "You think this changes how I see you, doesn't it?" "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "But it changes how I see myself in your world." She stepped closer. "I don't want you in my world, I want to be in yours." Kieran studied her, really studied her. Not the designer coat, not the name behind the company, but the woman standing in front of him, stripped of pretense. "I can't give you Manhattan penthouses or black tie galas," he said. "I don't want them," she replied. "I want blueberry pie at a diner and a kid who asks me to stay for pancakes." He didn't answer. Not yet. But when Callie burst into the room moments later, cheeks flushed from running the hallway and holding a half-finished drawing, Lena bent down and held it like it was a priceless painting. "I drew us," Callie said. "You, me, and Daddy, that's our house. And that's the dog we're gonna get." Kieran opened his mouth to correct her, to say something about jumping ahead, but Lena smiled and said, "We'll have to think of names." And just like that, something shifted. Not because of money, not because of secrets, but because Lena Vaughn, millionaire investment powerhouse, was crouching on the floor of a borrowed office, talking about imaginary dogs with a 6-year-old as if there was nowhere else she'd rather be. And for the first time in years, Kieran wondered if maybe, just maybe, his world was big enough for someone unexpected to fit into it. The snow melted slower in Montana than anywhere Lena had ever been. By the time the lodge's parking lot was clear, and the last of the ice dripped from the pine branches, her 7-day stay had stretched into its 3rd week. She didn't leave, not because of the view. Not because of the quiet, because of them. Every day that passed, her world shifted a little more from boardrooms and quarterly forecasts to pancake mornings and after-school art projects. And every night, when she sat with Callie on the worn couch watching cartoons while Kieran fixed something that didn't really need fixing, Lena felt something she'd taught herself to live without: peace. But peace had a price, and Lena knew hers was coming due. It arrived on a Thursday morning in the form of a sleek sedan and a man in a tailored overcoat standing in the lodge lobby with a briefcase and a frown. "Lena," he said, his voice clipped, "you've missed 4 meetings, 2 investor calls, and a keynote speech." She didn't blink. "I was never confirmed for the keynote. You were expected." Then they expected wrong. He glanced around the lobby like it offended him. "You've been hiding in a mountain lodge for nearly a month. The board is asking questions." They're always asking questions. He lowered his tone. You've never ignored them before. I've never had anything worth ignoring them for. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. She hadn't checked it in hours. The man exhaled. You've built something extraordinary. Don't throw it away for a distraction. She tilted her head. You think I'm distracted. I think you're forgetting who you are. No, she said, stepping past him. I'm remembering who I was before everything else got in the way. She left him standing there, stunned. By the time she got to the truck, Kieran was already loading a box of plumbing supplies into the bed. When he saw her face, he paused. Problem. Just a reminder, she said, climbing in beside Callie, that some people only see you for what you make, not who you are. Callie handed her a crayon. I saved you the purple one. And just like that, whatever tension had been simmering in Lena's chest dissolved. Later that night, when Kieran came in from the workshop, Lena was sitting at his kitchen table with her laptop open and a file folder beside it. He glanced at the table. Work, she shook her head. Closure, she turned the screen toward him. A draft resignation letter addressed to the Vaughn Group's board sat open, his brow furrowed. You're walking away. I built it to prove something, that I could take ashes and turn them into gold. That I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. He pulled out a chair, sitting across from her. And now I want to build something else, something real, something that doesn't vanish the moment the market dips. He said nothing for a moment, his fingers curling around the edge of the table. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, she said quietly. But I didn't come here to ask for permission. I came to ask if there's a place for me in your world, not just for a week or a storm, but for good. He leaned forward. You're the one with a penthouse in LA. I'm selling it. You have a company. I had a company. He studied her, really studied her, as if weighing the space between them in miles and years and fears that neither of them had spoken aloud. I don't have a guest room, he said. You'd still be on the couch, she shook her head, smiling. I don't need a room, I just need a place to belong. He stood, walked around the table, and held out his hand. She took it. He pulled her up gently, steady and slow, until she was standing in front of him. Then stay, he said. We'll figure the rest out. She didn't cry, but her throat tightened in a way that made words impossible. The next morning, they drove into town together. Lena stopped by the library with Callie to drop off a book while Kieran picked up supplies from the lumberyard. When they met outside the diner, Lena was holding a flyer. Found this on the bulletin board, she said. They're reopening the old storefront on Main, the one across from the bakery. He took the flyer from her hand, reading it. You thinking of leasing it? I was thinking of opening something small, a place with coffee and books and a corner for kids to read while their parents have a minute to breathe. He raised an eyebrow. You're serious, completely, he chuckled. You'd make a terrible barista. I'd hire someone better. I'd just run it, quietly, locally. You'd go from managing millions to managing muffins. I'd go from being tired all the time to finally breathing. He folded the flyer and tucked it into his jacket. Then we'll check it out this weekend. She looked up at him. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. That weekend, they signed the lease. That Monday, Lena sent her resignation. By the following Friday, Kieran had built her a counter from reclaimed oak and installed shelves along the walls. Callie named the place the Cozy Fox and insisted on drawing the logo herself. They framed it and hung it above the door. 2 months later, Lena stood behind that counter, a mug in one hand and a clipboard in the other, as Kieran walked in with a bouquet of wildflowers and dirt on his boots. You missed a spot, he said, pointing to a crooked frame on the wall. She grinned. You going to fix it, eventually, he said, wrapping an arm around her waist. But right now, I've got something more important in mind. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, her breath caught. I didn't pick a ring with a price tag to impress you, he said. Didn't fly it in. Didn't have it custom made. I just found one I thought you'd wear when you're making cocoa for a 6-year-old and laughing at my bad jokes. She opened the box. It was simple, elegant, perfect. I've fixed a lot of things, he said, his voice quiet. But you made me want to build something. Her eyes burned and she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Callie burst through the door just then, holding a paper crown and a juice box. Are we getting married now? She asked. Lena laughed. Soon. Good, Callie said. Because I already told my whole class. Kieran pulled Lena close, and for the first time in either of their lives, there was nothing missing. No more pretending, no more running, just home, right where they'd found each other. In the last place either of them expected to stay forever. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky streaked in hues of lavender and rose gold. Snow still clung to the ridgelines, but the valley had surrendered to spring. The air smelled of thawing pine, fresh earth, and something else, something hopeful. Lena stood in the back room of the Cozy Fox, the cafe now closed for the day, its windows adorned with wildflower garlands. The ceremony would be held just behind it, beneath the arch Kieran built from driftwood and copper piping. Callie had insisted it sparkle, but not too much, and Kieran had obliged, stringing soft lights that glowed like stars. Her dress wasn't couture. It wasn't flown in or custom-made. It was a soft, ivory silk gown she'd found at a local consignment shop, its clean lines fitting her like it had been waiting for her all along. She adjusted the delicate gold bracelet around her wrist, a gift from Callie, a tiny fox charm dangling from it, and took a breath. Maya, the cafe's newly hired baker and now declared maid of honor, peeked her head in. "You ready?" Lena smiled. "More than I ever thought I could be." Outside, the small crowd had gathered neighbors, friends, and the handful of townsfolk who had come to know her not as the woman from the city, but simply as Lena. Kieran stood beneath the arch, his suit a deep slate gray, collar open, sleeves rolled just once at the cuff. He'd shaved, barely, and his hands were clasped behind his back like he was holding something steady inside himself. Callie stood beside him, her dress a pale blue, her hair braided with tiny daisies. She carried a hand-painted sign that read, "Here comes forever." When Lena stepped through the back door, the world seemed to hush. No music, no dramatic entrance. Just the sound of wind threading through pine, and the look on Kieran's face like he was seeing something he never believed he deserved, but somehow got anyway. She walked to him, her steps slow and certain, her gaze never leaving his. When she reached him, Callie beamed and leaned in to whisper, "You look like a queen." Lena bent just enough to squeeze her hand. "And you, little fox, are my princess." The officiant began to speak, but Lena barely heard it. Her heart beat in slow, even rhythm. Kieran's fingers brushed hers, calloused and steady, as he reached for her hand. "I didn't know what I was building until you walked into my life," he said when it was time to speak. "I thought I'd already built all I could, a home for Callie, a life out of pieces. But you showed me I was just laying the foundation. You gave it walls, a roof, a future." Lena felt her eyes sting but didn't look away. "I thought I had everything, success, accomplishments, but I never had peace. I never had laughter in the mornings or warmth that didn't come from a fireplace. You gave me a life I didn't know how to ask for, and I'll spend the rest of it making sure you never have to fix anything alone again." They didn't exchange rings with grand speeches, just simple promises, sealed with hands held and eyes locked. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers, but Lena barely heard it. Kieran pulled her into his arms, not with haste but with reverence, as if the moment deserved to be etched into time. The reception was held in the cafe, now transformed with linen-draped tables, mason jars filled with candles, and platters of food made by half the town. Callie gave a toast of juice and cookies, declaring it the best day ever, and the entire room agreed. Later in the evening, Lena stood at the counter, barefoot now, dress hem lifted slightly to avoid the icing Callie had accidentally dropped. She watched Kieran refill the lemonade pitcher, his arm around their daughter's shoulders as they laughed about something she couldn't hear. "You look like someone who just realized they're exactly where they're meant to be," Maya said from beside her. "I am," Lena replied. "For the first time, I am." The next morning, they didn't rush anywhere, no airport, no schedule. Just the three of them curled up on the couch in their small home, sunlight pouring through the windows. Callie was drawing again, this time a picture of their wedding arch with 3 stick figures beneath it, and a dog that looked suspiciously like the one from her old sketch. "We still need to get him," she said, holding it up. "We will," Kieran promised. "Once we finish the fence." Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. "And maybe after we finish the nursery." He turned to her. Nursery, she nodded, eyes shining. We're going to need a bigger couch. His breath caught, and then he laughed a full, open sound that made Callie giggle without knowing why. He pulled Lena closer, his hand resting gently on her stomach. You sure? Positive, Callie clapped. I'm going to be a big sister. Outside, the snow had melted into rich soil, and green shoots were pushing up along the fence line Kieran had started last fall. The foundation of something new, something lasting. That night, when the stars came out, Lena stood at the back door, watching the lights flicker in the distance from the cafe across the field. Kieran came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. I never thought I'd get this, he said. She turned in his arms. You didn't get it, you built it. They kissed beneath the stars, the air cool but full of promise, the kind of promise that didn't need words. And this time there was nothing left unresolved. No secrets waiting to be confessed, no pasts that needed to be outrun. Just a family, a home, and the quiet certainty that love, real, lasting love, had found them exactly where they were meant to be.